Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Metro's Nada Yada Island podcast.
I almost fainted when the 4 new bombshells arrived. 4 free Samsung Galaxy A16 5G phones at Metro.
No way.
And finding out the 4th line is free? Oh, things got heated.
That's wild. Join Metro and get 4 free Samsung 5G phones. Only at Metro.
Plus tax. Bring 4 numbers and an ID and sign up for any Metro Flex plan. Not available currently at T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days.
Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 506, Lord Haw-Haw. Sun Tzu, the Chinese military general, strategist, and philosopher who was born around 544 BCE, is known for his seminal work, The Art of War, and of all his advice, the goal of which is twofold: to control not just the physical battlefield, but also the mental state of your adversaries. Enter Lord Haw-Haw. Following Sun Tzu's advice, the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda sought to demoralize the morale of British, Australian, Canadian, other allies, and eventually U.S. troops to weaken their effectiveness. The civilians of these countries were also targeted. After all, it was the workers in the factories and farms and other places that equipped these young men and women to go out and fight. The goal of Lord Haw-Haw, as he would soon become known as, was for London and Paris, early in the war, to leave the Reich alone. That Axis dominance of mainland Europe was the new reality, and it was better just to negotiate a peace settlement. This, of course, did not work, but soon Lord Haw-Haw was sharing information that seemed only the Germans could know, like the fate of Allied airmen shot down. Thus, people of Allied countries listened to his radio broadcast to attempt to glean more information of their loved ones. In time, Allied troops also listened for the sheer distraction, knowing that what they were hearing was mostly trite or hogwash. Still, boredom or a chance to forget about one's cares would be relieved, if only for a little while. So, they tuned in. The voice behind Lord Haw-Haw would actually be several different people. First, it was most likely Wolf Mittler, a German journalist who did a spot-on upper-crust English accent or way of speaking. But by the end of 1939, the man behind the voice was William Joyce, an American-born fascist. Well, he would become a fascist in time. Moving from New York when very young, he went to Ireland and then to England, where he joined Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists in 1932. Mosley had formed the British Union of Fascists in 1932. After all, Mussolini had been in power since 1922, and Hitler had been seeking power since the mid-1920s and would finally succeed a year from this time. So the timing for Mosley seemed most opportune. In 1936, with Hitler on a foreign policy role, Mosley changed the organization's name to the British Union of Fascists and National Socialists. But in 1937, it became the more benign British Union. Not that it mattered. As war came to Europe in 1939, his organization was proscribed, and in 1940, it was disbanded. Back to William Joyce. His family moved to Ireland when he was young, but his parents were Unionists, wanting Ireland and Britain under the same flag, versus the Irish Republicans who wanted the British out. Joyce's very safety was in question. So he went to England and received a first-class honors degree in English from Birkbeck College, London. He applied to the Foreign Office for a job, but was rejected, so became a teacher. It was the mid-1920s, and William soon took an interest in fascism. Back to 1932, he joined the British Union of Fascists and soon became a leading speaker for the organization. 2 years later, he was made the British Union of Fascists Director of Propaganda and Deputy Leader. Over the next few years, Joyce would become more radical and violent. Mosley would fire him in the mid-1930s, and as the 1930s continued on, William's professional life became harder, and in August 1939, he and his wife Margaret fled to Germany after receiving a tip that the British authorities were about to detain him. He became a naturalized German citizen in 1940. Taking advantage of his skills, he was hired for German radio's English service in 1939. He would be quickly promoted as he was good at propaganda. His first broadcast was reading the news in English on September 6, 1939, just 3 days after the declaration of war between Britain and Germany. Still in September 1939, with Joyce on the radio 6 days a week, British radio critic Jonah Barrington of the Daily Express would write of this person and soon nickname him Lord Haw-Haw. By then, Joyce was the most prominent broadcaster of Nazi propaganda. And at his height in 1940, Joyce had 6 million regular and 18 million occasional listeners in the UK. His broadcasts would all start the same: Germany calling, repeated 3 times. Here's a sample of him putting a negative spin on a British naval rescue operation.
Germany calling, Germany calling, Germany calling. One would describe as the height of cynicism the message sent by the First Lord of the Admiralty to the captain of the British destroyer Cossack, congratulating him on his gallant rescue efforts. Only a person of Mr. Churchill's mentality could congratulate anybody, first on shooting unarmed men, and secondly, on flagrantly violating Norwegian neutrality.
His radio announcements would be broadcasted to audiences in the United Kingdom on the medium wave station like Sender Hamburg, and by shortwave to the United States. As Joyce had been doing something like this for years, he was very good at it. Soon, urban legends grew that he had direct access to political and military sources within Germany. Thus, while he raked the Allies over the coals for their supposed stupidity at fighting a losing fight, something could be possibly gleaned from him. Big historical events are like investing goals. A little here, a little there. It adds up. Then something big happens. That's whatever your investing goals are. And that's Acorn's approach. Use your spare change to start investing for your future. And you can earn bonus investments just for buying what you need from brands you love. I've been using Acorns for the last 5 years, and I'm happy. I needed 5 minutes to set it up, and now my future is that much less stressful. After all, a new year is here, so use that as a marker to start something new for you. Again, I have a regular account, a retirement account, and something set up for my 2 youngest daughters. So, to sum up, Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You do not need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns let you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5 or even just your spare change. Again, I've been using this for 5 years and I'm happy, and I genuinely want you to give it a try. Head to acorns.com/WW2 or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, and SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/WW2. During the early war years, when things looked bleak for Britain and its allies, Lord Haw-Haw most assuredly got on listeners' nerves, perhaps tricking them into questioning the war effort at all. That would change in time, but that change was a long time coming. Thus, his broadcasts had the desired effect. Here's Lord Haw-Haw on the invasion of Denmark and Norway, putting the blame squarely on London.
This morning, strong German forces have entered or have been landed in these 2 countries. To cover these military operations, extensive mine barrages have been laid. While British and French military experts are still writing articles, wondering why Germany has not yet started a blitzkrieg on the Western Front, the lightning-like actions of the German defense forces have informed Mr. Churchill and Monsieur Paul Reynaud that Germany is not prepared to allow Great Britain and France to infest the North Sea, the Arctic Sea, and Northern Europe with further strategic positions like Gibraltar, Malta, and Corsica. New Germany is determined to deal any power a decisive blow if that power stretches out its hands with the intention of throttling the German people. Germany has no quarrels with Denmark or Norway, but Germany has carefully studied the maritime history of Great Britain. She remembers Copenhagen in 1807. She remembers the seizing of Malta and Gibraltar. She remembers the bombardment of Alexandria in 1882, and she has not forgotten that England and France were making preparations to occupy the Balearic Islands during the Spanish Civil War. That attempt was frustrated by Italian watchfulness. Germany has for months been just as observant and alive to the danger which threatens all strategical points in Northern Europe that might serve as naval or air force bases for Great Britain and France in their war of destruction against Germany. Mr. Winston Churchill knows today that he has no longer any chance of repeating his exploits of Sydney Street in Antwerp, Gallipoli, and Murmansk. That versatile and agile amateur strategist is at last up against a leadership and a defense force of a people keyed up to a maximum of activity and having achieved the acme of technical perfection. They do not have to discuss the blitzkrieg as a theoretical problem because they are the human embodiment of that cleansing atmospheric phenomenon, the thunderstorm, which dispels the sultry atmosphere of intrigues and conspiracies, of political crime and of indifference to human suffering.
And then there was the moment after France fell that Britain was put on notice. You, my dear listeners, are next.
Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to listen to that famous commentator of present war days, Lord Haw-Haw, speaking to England. The week which has just gone by began with a feeling of tension and suspense. The great offensive against France had been brought to a victorious conclusion. The French had laid down arms, and throughout the world people wondered when the final act, the offensive against British soil, would come. In Germany and many other countries, particularly in England, there was a firm conviction that it would come soon, and that conviction remained. The day and the hour are the Führer's secret, and he has returned in triumph to Berlin amid scenes of unprecedented rejoicing. And we enter into a week that may be even more sensational than any we have yet experienced. The great exodus from Britain is well underway. The rich and affluent are removing themselves and their valuables as fast as they can. Great stretches of the coastline have been evacuated to a depth of 20 miles. Hastily improvised defenses are being erected, which are things of papier-mâché and cardboard in comparison with the Maginot Line and the forts of Liège. The city is quaking, and whilst genuine business has practically come to a standstill in London, speculators are enjoying a brief paradise. There is naturally a strong prejudice in favor of spot cash dealings. None of the sharks wants to take the risk of waiting for settlement day. The political prisoners who have been arrested and thrown into jail without trial or it is said to be transported to Canada. Thus a fresh crime is to be perpetrated by the corrupt dictator of England against men and women who dared to say in time that peace offered the only hope for their country.
And how could he not comment dryly on the great achievement of their ally, the Japanese Empire, on its surprise attack at Pearl Harbor?
Hello, North America. Germany calling. We now present Lord Haw-Haw speaking to England. To say the British Empire is in danger today would be a very feeble understatement. Never before has it been in such a perilous position. Until Roosevelt and Churchill so needlessly provoked Japan into taking up arms, the greater part of the British Empire felt itself outside the war zone. Of course, to be outside the war zone is not necessarily to be safe. For example, Canada was secure against any attack by Germany or Italy. But she was not secure against peaceful penetration by the United States. The agreement just concluded, whereby the virtual control of her industries falls into American hands, and whereby tariffs, customs, and other functions of independence may be arbitrarily removed by a committee under American domination, this charter of Canadian subjugation was not a mushroom growth. It was rather the culmination, at a suitable moment, of the plans which Roosevelt and his predecessors have been making for years to exclude British influence from both American continents. And, as a member of the Rockefeller family recently said in public, to give the United States a monopoly in the Western Hemisphere. Mr. Kessler, the Australian Prime Minister, has addressed directly to President Roosevelt what amounts to an appeal for aid without safeguards. How far this message was inspired by Churchill himself, I cannot say. But Roosevelt now has his excuse for landing troops in Australia and keeping them there if he can until that inconceivable day when all Britain's debts to the United States shall have been paid. A member of the New Zealand cabinet declares that the most perilous moment in the history of his country has arrived. What the peoples of Australia and New Zealand may be thinking is easy to imagine. Their troops are fighting in North Africa to gain for Churchill prestige and propaganda victories, which, as previous events have shown, can exert no influence upon the issue of the war as a whole. They are at war with Japan, who has shown a most remarkable talent for carrying out multiple attacks on the widest scale. And on the other hand, they know that if American troops appear in the guise of saviors, they will remain in the role of bailiffs. They cannot be reassured by statements from the BBC to the effect that the home government sympathizes with their position, understands their concern, and will not forget them, but that on the other hand they cannot expect the British forces to be everywhere at the same time. While such useless phrases might be accepted by the patient, docile, and uncritical British public, they are not sufficient to assuage the colonial unrest. Now, it is all the more remarkable that the United States should be gaining such an ascendancy over the British Empire, when Roosevelt's conduct of the war against Japan has been such a signal failure up to the present. Having lost his Pacific fleet, he can hardly afford to pose as the master of the situation.
As for the war on the Eastern Front, not only did Germany speak of their recent victories, Berlin wanted this to appear as a unified, even international force of like-minded individuals from said countries battling the evil Bolsheviks. No matter, that arrogant tone would change in time.
Hello, North America. This is Germany calling. And that is the end of the German popular concert. And we're now going to broadcast news in English. And here is the news. Today's official German war communique reads as follows. From the Führer's headquarters, December the 28th, the German Supreme Command announces. In the southern sector of the Eastern Front, the enemy, who had succeeded in making local penetrations, was thrown back in successful counterattacks. German, Italian, and Slovakian troops, as well as the SS Division Viking, made up of Danish, Finnish, Flemish, Dutch, and Norwegian volunteers, have again proved their valor. On the central sector of the front, strong enemy attacks were brought to a standstill after fierce fighting. Minor Soviet attacks on the northern sector were also repulsed. On all sectors of the front, the Luftwaffe participated in the ground fighting by carrying out effective raids on enemy positions and on the enemy supply and railway system in the rear. In the Straits of Kerch, strong German bomber and Stuka formations continued their attacks against enemy shipping. 3 transports totaling 2,800 tons were sunk, and 4 more ships as well as a gunboat were damaged.
And now that the Americans were active participants in the war, it was time to tell them how their territory would be carved up for and by the Japanese Empire.
The Speaker of the Army Department of the Imperial Japanese Headquarters in Tokyo stated that the Japanese command on Luzon discarded the declaration of Manila as an open city. The Japanese speaker continued by stating that the Japanese troops would not permit this one-sided declaration to interfere with the execution of all measures necessary for the carrying on of the war. The speaker referred to the fact that Manila itself is the nerve center of the Philippine resistance and that the city is surrounded by important military and naval installations. The Japanese army speaker, however, stressed the fact that Japanese forces would limit their attacks to military objectives, and nothing would be undertaken which resembled in the least the American massacre of innocent Japanese nationals, such as took place shortly before the Japanese landing on Davao.
But, like the man said, nothing lasts forever, which is certainly true of the Third Reich. The Italian Empire was already gone by 1943, and soon the Japanese Empire would join them. But note here, during Lord Haw-Haw's last radio message, how he brilliantly fans the flames of doubt between the Allies, bringing in Stalin's territorial ambitions, and that, with hindsight, perhaps the man in Berlin wasn't that far off the mark, a Parthian shot over the radio waves. After all, if you're going down, might as well take your enemy with you.
This evening, I am talking to you about Germany. That is a concept that many of you may have failed to understand. Let me tell you that in Germany there still remains the spirit of unity and the spirit of strength. Let me tell you that here we have a united people who are modest in their wishes. They are not imperialists. They don't want to take what doesn't belong to them. All they want is to live their own simple lives, undisturbed by outside influences. That is the Germany that we know. I can remember when I cast my memory back to 1932 and 1931. I can remember how everything that could be done to stimulate the hatred of England against Germany was done. I remember how my own friend said, "What shall we do with this man Hitler? He wants Poland.
He wants Czechoslovakia. What shall we do if he wants more than that? Now, it does behoove you to think at the moment how much Stalin has taken and how much Stalin wishes. I ask you to remember that in 1939, in August, the only question was that of bringing Danzig back the Reich. No more and no less. What a small problem that was in comparison with those that confront us today. Surely, if only we had had the common sense to agree that the German people of Danzig should go back to the Reich, then we might have had peace. We might have avoided all the terrible sacrifices of the last 5.5 years. We might have avoided the hatreds, which can only be very gradually repaired. Now, I say to you, my English listeners, the trouble is this. Germany, if you like, is not anymore the chief factor in Europe. Germany may be, I may be wrong, I will only say that the German arms have been in many battlefields defeated. Germany will live because the people of Germany have in them the secret of life, endurance, will, and purpose. And therefore I say to you, in these last words, you may not hear from me again for a few months. I say, Es lebe Deutschland! Heil Hitler!
Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
And farewell.
As for William Joyce himself, his time as a propagandist and agitator ended on May 28, 1945, when British forces found him in Flensburg, Germany, near the German-Denmark border. An Allied soldier, a Jewish German who had left Germany before the war, engaged in a conversation with a man, and he recognized his voice. Ah, the price of fame. Not to worry, Joyce had a fake passport ready, so he reached into his pocket to retrieve it, something one ought not to do when being questioned by men with guns. So they shot him, thinking he was reaching for a weapon. Their bullets penetrated his buttocks. He was taken, hopefully gingerly, to London and tried on 3 counts of high treason. He traitorously adhered to the king's enemies in Germany by broadcasting propaganda. He became a naturalized subject of Germany after the war commenced. And finally, kind of mixing the first two, the charge was broadcasting propaganda before becoming a German subject, thus while still being a British subject. The third charge might have been a bit pedantic perhaps, but the offended country was in no mood to play, as they had been on food rations for years and were now looking to rebuild their country and their way of life, all the while mourning those they had lost. Proving this, there were discussions betwixt the lawyers about when he applied for German citizenship, when did he receive it? Thus, when did he quit being a British citizen? So, the first two charges were dropped. Now, as the historian A.J.P. Taylor wrote in a book, technically, Joyce was hanged for making a false statement when applying for a passport, the usual penalty for which is a small fine. But there was nothing small about Joyce's contribution to the war effort, and not for the Allies. The Court of Appeal upheld the conviction, and on January 3, 1946, at Wandsworth Prison, age 39, Joyce was hanged. As for his wife Margaret Joyce, called Lady Haw-Haw, she was not charged with treason, and she would live until 1972. Joyce would leave this world as he lived in it, defiant. Just before his death, he blamed, of course, the Jews. He said, "In death as in life, I defy the Jews who caused this last war, and I defy the power of darkness which they represent. I warn the British people against the crushing imperialism of the Soviet Union. May Britain be great once again, and in the hour of the greatest danger in the West, may the standard be raised from the dust, crowned with the words, 'You have conquered, nevertheless.' I am proud to die for my ideals, and I am sorry for the sons of Britain who have died without knowing why." One may easily argue why those British sons and other sons died in this war. After all, violence on civilians and threatened occupation is straightforward enough to understand. As Germaine Greer, an Australian writer and feminist, said, "Freedom is fragile and must be protected. To sacrifice it, even as a temporary measure, is to betray it." Or, if one needs that sentiment in a more masculine tone, Theodore Roosevelt said, "We too, born to freedom and believing in freedom, are willing to fight to maintain freedom. We, and all others who believe as deeply as we do, would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So this was just a standalone episode. We'll get back to Crimea. Crimea will be finished in 2 episodes, and then we'll go on to Leningrad, and then we'll go back to Army Group Center. So that way we don't have to do all of the minutia, just some of the minutia. So let's see here as far as donations. Stan Favre donated, and he's a member, and we chatted back and forth across the email. Both of us like to get up very early in the morning when the house is quiet and no one can disturb you, and you can get stuff done. So anyway, Stan, good luck with your business. I think you said you've been doing it for like 20 years, so Stan, you're the man. So again, thank you very much for the donation. As far as the newest members, I'd like to say welcome aboard to Gerald Parker of Grass Valley, California, and Brian Bergman of Porter Ranch, California. And finally, Gordon Cameron. I'm not sure where you're from, Gordon. I apologize. But anyway, thank you all very much. I hope y'all enjoy the membership episodes. I am near the end, probably 1 or 2 episodes left of the Winter War, and then I've got something else I want to jump into. So again, thank you for supporting the show. I appreciate it so much. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly out of the darkness appeared bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.